All right, so I got a list of topics. I'm going to start off with top to bottom. So John sent me multi-record objects and ways to access and walk through them. John, are you here? All right, so since John's not here, I'm going to move on to the next topic. Did anyone want me to cover, I don't know what multi-record objects are, but I guess objects with multiple objects within the object, I'm guessing. Did anyone want me to cover that or move on to the next topic? Let's see, chat. That's cool. That's cool on which one? Basically, you just said yes.
Objects with objects. Okay. Yeah.
So you want objects with objects.
I'm down for that.
That's cool. I don't know what that means. you have to clarify. Yes, you do want objects with objects. So when asking between two answers, it has to be one or the other, not yes. Okay. So let's go with objects with objects. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. There we go. Share screen. Okay, so let's take our existing object that we had from 6.1, the customer object, and let's add some additional data to it. And let's make it have objects within objects. Actually, there already is an object within an object, but let's say that we have something that's even more deeply nested. For example, let's say that we had our open weather API, which had an object with an object, and it had other data within. So what I'm going to do is add something else to here. To the customer, I'm going to add, let's see, address, phone number, hobbies. And I'm just going to keep that as an object itself. That should actually, hobby. And I'm going to put, I don't know, this is kind of a crappy object. Let me think of a good one. So if I want to put an object, an address is a good idea. Within here, why don't we make it more complicated? So address, and then streets close by. General, Washington Avenue. So let's put street. And one more street, I guess, I don't know, Western or something. Western Avenue. It should probably be capitalized, but I don't really care. All right, so right now we have an object. What we're trying to access is streets close by. Streets close by is nested within an object itself. It's property of this object. This object is a property of the customer object. All right, so if I wanted to access something in here, like let's say that I got this customer object back from making an AJAX call. So it's making an API call from the front end. If I wanted to get the data that's inside of this property of this object, I would have to then go backwards. I would say, okay, I'm looking at this streets close by. Streets close by is an array. And if I'm supposed to get a specific element out of this array, like Washington Avenue, This is within an array. So I know I essentially have to work backwards. So let's say I want a console.log. Let's see, console.log. I do streets close by, and I do 1. Now I'm going backwards. So I start off from here, and then I go up. So the streets close by is actually within this address object. So I do address dot streets close by. And this address object is within the customer object. So then I do customer dot address dot streets close by, and that'll give me Washington Avenue. So this, no matter how deeply nested you are, you can still keep using the bracket and dot notation. Bracket notation for indexing through an array, bracket or dot notation if you're going through an object. So I think that's as deep as it usually gets. It doesn't usually get too deep after that, like maybe an object, an object, an object, but it follows the same convention. Again, you start off with what you're trying to get, and then you move up from there. So you just say, okay, I want to get this. This is inside here. This is an array. Okay. Streets close by. This is the second element, index at 1. This is within address. So I do address dot streets close by. And this object is within another object. So I do customer dot address dot streets close by. Any questions about that? Let's see. Let me look at chat. Why would you want to put objects within another object rather than an array? Quick access of objects. So it depends on what you want. If you want a list of things inside of an object, then you use an array. If you want to put data for specific elements that are connected to each other, then you use an object. So remember, an object is a series of properties and values, right? So notice that we have this over here. We have this address. For address, we wouldn't be putting an array because these properties and values define the address itself. If you wanted multiple addresses, then you would put in an array of multiple addresses. But if you want a bunch of connected properties and values that make up an object, then use an address. So it depends on what you're trying to do. Does that make sense, or do you want me to cover that again? Okay. Using this example, what if you had multiple customers in this object with the same fields, name, address? How do you show each customer? So if you wanted to loop through it, you had multiple customers in this object. So you had a customer object. Well, you shouldn't have a customer object with multiple customers. You should have a customers array or object, and that customer's object or array would then have multiple customer objects or arrays. So preferably, it should be something like this, where you have.
Let's talk JSON Stringify.
Oh, what? Sorry, can everyone put their mics on mute?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I might even have mine on.
Again, if you guys have questions, then unmute yourself and then you can ask. Otherwise, yeah, then just have it on mute. All right, so if you had multiple customers, let's say you had var customers equals, so you could either have this where, and this is very common, you have, you know, Joyce, actually, let's see. No, this would be an object. So this would be like this. This is gonna look weird, but it's gonna make sense. So you have Joyce. How do I spell Joyce? There we go. And then you have, let's see. I don't know. Actually, this would probably be name Joyce. Let's just use this actually. You said you wanted the same one, so why don't we just do that? I think this makes sense. So what I'm doing here is I'm returning an array of objects. So the way I'm structuring the data is that I have an array with 2 objects, Joyce, Chang, age is 40 or something. I don't know, I'm just trying to change stuff. 42, 3rd Street, New York, I guess, same thing. I guess the same streets. Phone number is going to be, you know, like 444, and it's going to be 555, whatever. 2222. So now we have 2 objects. So we have an array of objects. So if I wanted to loop over and show all of the elements in this object, I could just do a for loop. Now, if I want to show all the elements inside, so all the properties and values inside of the objects themselves, then I would have to use a for var in loop. So in order to use a for var in loop, I would have to do something like, let's see, let me double check, make sure. For in loop, JavaScript array, let me make sure I'm doing this right. Blah, 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 blah. Iteration, come on. Drop an object. Blah, blah. Okay, so if I wanted to go through each, the internet connection is unstable. Is everyone still able to see all this? Yeah, okay, cool. So what I'm gonna do is, let me just come up with something real quick. So we have customers. So I'm gonna use for var I equals 0, I less than length, I plus plus. Why is it being so weird? Okay. So the length of customers should be what? And you can post that into the chat. Looking at customers over here, customers is an array, and we have 2 objects. So based on that, the length of customers is 2. Excellent, yes. So we have 2 elements in here. So what I want to do is I'm going to loop twice. And for each time I loop, I'm going to use a for var in loop. Var, so let's say, what do we name each one? Let's just name it prop. In, let's see, customers I. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, I have an array of objects, and the first thing I want to do is loop over all the objects or all the elements in my array. Then when I get to each object, I want to loop over each property inside of the object itself. So in order to do that, I can actually just do something like this, console.log, and I do prop, and that should give me the value for each property in each one. Let me make sure that works. So I'm going to close this, comment this out, and let me run this. Let's make sure this works. I need to get the value. So this is just listing all the different properties. To get the value of the properties, I have to do customers. I do prop, and that's the value. So let's see. Joyce, Chang, Joyce, John Smith, 25. Let me make sure that's correct. I think that's right. John Smith, 25. Address is object, phone number. Yep. Okay, that's right. So what I did was, this looks a little complicated, and let me just send this to you guys. Let's see. How do I use this one? Send it over chat. I should be able to copy paste. Let me just do it to Slack. I'm just gonna copy and paste this to Slack because I know it works in Slack. So I'm gonna go to general and I'm just gonna copy paste this over. And it is working the way I want it to. Let me just get to the right screen, god damn it. Okay, so I have this. And I want to put it in my Slack. Where is my Slack? No, I don't want it on another screen. Just give me back my screen. God damn it. How do I put things on the same screen? This is dumb. Right now I'm on 2 desktops. I just want everything on one screen. Let's see. I'm just going to open this up on desktop 2. Yeah. Customer object. Okay. So cool. So now I can just open this up in the browser. You sure that's the right one? Yeah. Okay. So now I should just be able to paste it in. All right, so you guys should have the same file as I do now. So what I did here was, and this is actually important for learning how to be more efficient with your code. Although at this point, it's not that necessary, but I think it is important in the long run. So let's say that we have like a bunch of data that we need to get through, right? And we want to print the same stuff out. So Marissa was talking about an optimal solution. So what I did was I said, okay, if it's the same information that I'm going to be printing out, for instance, let's say list the customers in this case. And we know that we want to list it for all the customers, right? Then we just say, okay, customers.length. And even if we didn't, we could actually set something like this. Let's say that if, you know, customers, actually, you could do an if statement here. It says if customers, I don't know, prop is, or actually, if prop is equal to, I don't know, like something like that we want, like first name. then only console.log, I don't know, that first name, right? So let's say that we only want to get the value of first name out. I might just be complicating this too much from the beginning. Let me go back. Sorry, I don't want to overcomplicate it. So first what I did was I said, okay, I want to go through all the customers that we have. So we have 2 customers at this point. We could have an infinite amount. This works for an infinite amount of customers, right? So I go through each and every one of the customers. Does that make sense so far? Does that not make sense to anybody so far? Okay, so no one has any confusion about that. Okay, so now what we have is this for in loop, and a for in loop, what it does is it works on objects and it allows you to either get the property of an object or the value of the property in an object and loop over it. So when you use a for in loop, the variable prop or whatever variable you name here represents the property of that object that you pass in for this in argument over here. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm passing in whatever instance I'm running into for the customers. So I go through the first object that's in here. So this will first go through all of the first customer, then it'll go through the next customer, right? So this is just an object. These are unnamed objects, right? So it just goes through each one. Now you use this prop or whatever you want to name it, like you can name this poop, but it should probably be named, you know, something like prop, makes sense. Prop stands for property. Now, if you list something just like this, if you say, you know, console.log prop, what happens is it will list out all the different properties that exist that are directly attached to that customer object. So if I save this and inspect, and let's see, just refresh it, I get back all the properties of each object, right? So let's see if that matches up. First name, last name, age, address, and phone number. That's what I should see. First name, last name, age, address, phone number. And it should happen twice because we have 2 objects in here. Each object is an element in this array, right? Cool so far? Let me know if you guys have any questions up to this point. How do I open this? I'll wait a couple seconds for people to post if they have any questions at this point. What if we want to list all customers who live in New York? In this case, both customers. Okay, so we're going to get to that. And that's a good point. It's like, what if we want to filter for data, right? Like you only want to say like, okay, I only want to put, or I only want to show all the customers that live in New York. So let's go to a more basic example first in terms of validation, and then we'll get to that better example, which is a more realistic example that you're giving. So let's make sure that, okay, we're only, now let's say that we wanted to limit this, right? We limit our loop. And first off, before we limit our loop, what we're trying to do is say like, I only want to show the property and or value, whatever I want, of that one property value pair. So let's say that you want to go through all the customers, but all you want to take out of it is first name property and the value of the first name. So let's just do that. So we say is we go through if property is equal to first name, console.log, the value of that first name. So let me make sure that this works. John and Joyce, that seems to work. Okay. So what happened was, and this is pretty cool, right? Like you can actually go through the data and only get what you want. And we did this before, but we never did it with the for loop, or we never did it with the for in loop. So if I want to get, let's see, John out of here and Joyce out of here, So all the values of first name, then I can do that by just saying an if statement in here. So if the property is equal to, and remember the property names are going to be listed as strings. So you just list the property names that you want to get out, right? And you just say if prop equals first name, and you console.log. And this part's a little bit confusing, right? It's like customers I prop, what the fuck does that mean? So you kind of have to look at it carefully. You say, okay, the customer object that I'm on at this point, right? And you pass it the property. The property in this case is first name. So you're going through each property. You pass the property through, and now you're just using bracket notation to cycle through an object, right? So this is the same thing as me going like this. So that's the reason I'm getting back John and Joyce, right? So if I did this, this should be the same thing. Yeah, I refresh and it does the exact same thing. But we want to do this using a loop, so we do it like this. Now, let's say we want to make it more complicated. We want it to show first name, last name, and age. So what I do is I set this to if prop is equal to first name, or prop is equal to last, damn it. I need to learn how to use Zoom. Okay. You guys can also see my screen, is that correct? Let me know if it's obfuscated. Can everyone still see the screen? Yes, no, maybe so. Type in yes for yes, no for no. Oh, shit. Apparently, I don't know how to use Zoom. I didn't see any of these. Okay. All right. That was my fault. Okay. How do I use this stupid thing? This is not very intuitive. All right. So at this point, what I want to do is get only certain data out. So I say last name, and then I use this OR operator again. And I'm just going to decrease the size of this so it fits on the screen. And what else do we want to get out? Age. Okay. Prop is equal to age. So what happens is if I do this, what it'll do is, well, actually, let me ask you guys. So post what you guys think it's going to do at this point. Let me see if this is, yeah. Well, is it going to post the properties? So make sure you guys put your videos on silent or your mics on silent. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, it's going to show the first name, last name, age of the two objects, essentially the values of the properties, right? So if I wanted to show the properties, what I could do is just this. But that wouldn't make sense. I want to show the values of the properties. So I do this. And I can see that over here. John Smith, 25, Joyce Chang, 40. And I can also do some cool stuff. Console.log, maybe make it look all nice, separate them, you know, something like that. So now we have a good separation, right? Okay. Actually, if I want to separate each element, I could do this. let's see, this, that should work. Yeah, there you go. So now I have a nice list of different elements, and I can see clearly that this is John Smith 25, this is the first object, Joyce Chang 40, that's the next object, so on and so forth. Yes, whoever user is, a for in loops, it allows you to be more specific with information you're looping through, but it could be used for just listing everything in an object. The purpose of a for in loop is to just go through all the properties of an object, not necessarily to single anything out, but it can be used to single things out. So questions so far? You have 5 seconds. Also, if you guys do have questions and you don't type fast enough or something, feel free to unmute yourself and then ask a question. And then, and then you can mute again. All right, so I'm assuming we're good so far. So now what we're gonna get to is, let's see, I think it was Joanna's question. What if we wanna list all the customers who live in New York? Okay, so if we did this, what we'd have to do is, so we look at city and we look at the value of New York, right? So the value of New York is a string within the city property. So again, we're going backwards here. We have to go backwards. We look at the value. We look at what it's inside. So this is a property of the address object, which is a property of the customers array. So we go back and we say, okay, New York is a value of city inside the address object. So what I have to search for is if let's see, customers I I see a naked student at the top right. I think that's Marco. Hello?
Whoops. Hold on, dude. My bad. Let me take it out. How to take out the video?
This is pretty great. I still see you.
Hold on. But
I don't know if I click on you, if it's stopping your video. Yeah, that works. That's good enough. All right. So from here, we have to determine if the value in this address.city is going to be equal to New York. So let's make sure I'm going to be able to do that right. So I say property, address, let's see, address, and then city. So so this is going to be the property dot, let's see, so dot city, and then I'm going to put is equal to New York. Let's see if that works. Oh, sorry. This is supposed to be in here. Let me see if I got that right. So var prop in city.city is equal to New York. Console.log. Make sure that works. New York, New York. Yeah, that seems to work. Okay, cool. So a little bit more complicated, but actually not too bad once you think about it. So what I did was I looped through all of the objects again, right? So, well, not all the objects. I loop through all the objects first, and then I look for the specific object using I, and I say, okay, go through all the properties, and if the properties property city has a value that's equal to New York, then print out that property. If I want to print out the customer itself, then I have to do, let's see. If I want to list all the things that are inside that that object, then I'd have to do find the object that has all this data inside and go back and then recursively go over it. I could use recursion, or I could then use the previous or next selectors within the object. But that's a little bit more complicated. So this one, it would allow you to actually filter through for New York. But if I want to get the entire customer object itself, that's something I'd have to look up. I've done this before. I just don't remember how. So yeah, let me just look that up after this session, and then I'll get back to you on that, because I know what it is. I just don't remember exactly how to do it. Any questions about this so far, though? What this does and how it works? How would you check for a value within an object without knowing if the value exists? So this is what I did. So if the value does exist, then it'll print it. Otherwise, it won't do anything. So this is essentially checking to see if I do else, then it's just gonna print out everything else if I wanted to, right? So if it doesn't exist, just print out everything else. Well, you do have to know the property. If you don't know the properties of an object, there's no way you can parse through it. To get the properties of an object, you can either go to the API documentation of what you're trying to retrieve, or you can just retrieve the object and then just print the object to console log, and then just go through it step by step. Like, let's say I didn't know what the customer's object looked like. I could just do console.log customers 1 or something like that, and then I could look at that here, and I can go through it and I look at all the different properties. But you do have to know what the properties are if you want to parse through it. Oh, yeah, Joanna, this is actually supposed to be a review, so feel free to ask review questions. This is less about learning new things and more about going over concepts to understand them. Okay, so how would you print out one of the properties of the object onto HTML? Excellent. So do you want to print out the property, or do you want to print out the value of the property? The value of the property. Okay, so to do that, instead of doing a console.log, let's just do the New York one, right? What I could do is let's add some HTML here. Add stuff to me is going to be a div that I created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my JavaScript. And I want to start using jQuery. So in order to start using jQuery, I have to include it. So we'd use script. And then let's see, jQuery. No, I want minified. All right, so now I should be able to use jQuery. So what I'm going to do is jQuery just makes it easier to select things and do stuff with it. So let's see. I wanted to. So I am missing one thing, class. And what I do is I want to put stuff in there. So let's just put this. Actually, this will append. So I'll do this. There we go. Cool. So what I did here was, again, stuff that I did really fast and probably looks complicated. So I'm going to go over it slowly. And this is probably like a bad way of doing it, actually, because I added it to the same one. What I did was a very basic version of displaying whatever I have from the object into the HTML. So I just created this object. So this is not a dynamic way of doing it, where I have a class or a div called add stuff to me. And what I did was I just shoved the city into that element. So again, I always want to start off with like a basic way of doing it and then go into like a more complex way of doing it, right? So now it's like, okay, I know how to put stuff in there, but how do I do it in a better way? It's like, oh, okay, well, instead of just putting this as get the existing HTML and then add whatever HTML I want to put into there, maybe I should create some HTML and then append it to add stuff to me. So why don't we do that instead? So now we know how to do it in the basic way. Now why don't we create some elements? So why don't we create a div? So remember, use the carrots to create an element. And then in there, we'll put customers.prop.city. And why don't we save this into a variable? So for city, and then what we'll do is we'll take this and we'll do append. And we'll just put city in there. So now let's see what happens. There you go. So now it looks a lot nicer. And you'll notice that instead of me just putting everything into the HTML, I created some divs. So it went over a loop. Put each element that we got out of that object into a div and then appended it to add stuff to me. So this is really cool stuff. Like you can actually do some amazing things with this where you can get values from the stock market, be able to dynamically generate tables, be able to dynamically generate like, entire web applications based on data that's being pulled from different sites. Any questions about this, what I just did? I'll wait a few seconds. Okay, someone's a slow typer. And again, if you're a slow typer, make sure that you guys unmute yourselves, speak up, and say something before I move on. Yes, you can create any element within the query, correct? Yes, Marcos, I will be sending out the link to the video. It is being recorded, I hope. I set it to be recorded, but I am not used to using Zoom. So hopefully it's being recorded. Excellent. I'm glad you guys are finding it useful. All right. So now let's move on to the next topic. So APIs, connecting, calling, and accessing objects. So we have part of this that we've done, and I think this is actually a good segue into using some of this to maybe making API calls and then using the for loop through it. Hopefully there'll be repeated objects that we can cycle through. Let me think of an API that has multiple objects of the same thing. I know we can make multiple calls to IMDB, but I know it just returns one movie at a time. Let me see if there's a way to return multiple movies. Multiple movies. Oh God, XML. That's bad. Okay, you can get up to 9 movies like this. So if you have the search parameter, it allows you to get multiple movies back. Let me confirm that with the API. Search, so S is search. Movie title is search for. It doesn't explicitly say anything, but let me try it out. Okay. So the reason I want to get multiple results back again is because I want to be able to loop through the same objects using what we created over here. So let me make that API call. So if we have, let's use 6.2 because 6.2 we actually use or IMDB API. This is a bit convoluted though. Here, I'm just going to use my own tutorial. So I'm just going to my tutorial and I'm just going to copy and paste some sample code. And just going to go back to customer objects. And should I get rid of all that? No, I won't get rid of that yet. Let's paste some of this sample code here. Okay, so we have some sample code, blah, blah, blah. Let's see how this looks. Open in browser. Okay, so I have some sample code here. All the sample code does is give me title, year, a submit button, raw output, and then another div. I did use some Bootstrap, so I do want to maybe use that to make it look nice. So why don't I do that? Bootstrap CDN. Come on. And let's see how that looks. A lot better. Okay. So from here, Karunashi session activities. What? I'll answer that afterwards. Right now, let's just focus on this. So I have this title, year, and I have submit. So instead of title, what I want to actually grab is a whole bunch of different movies. So let me go back to the tutorial, and we have this code over here. And I'm just going to delete this stuff. Well, actually, let me just comment it out. Double commented some stuff. And let's add this instead. Okay, so I fucking hate this. Jesus. Why does it keep doing that? Okay. And I don't think I need this anymore. Okay, yeah. So we have our HTML, and our HTML is pretty simple. Right now we have a row, has some columns for the title and the year, and then it has a submit. So if I click on the submit, it doesn't do anything unless I add something with jQuery or JavaScript to do something with it. And I also have some raw output HTML, and all that is an H2 with a span inside of it, and another div with another H2, and then this is supposed to be a pretty version of it. So the reason I did it this way is I wanted to show what the JSON.Stringify would show as the object coming out. And this is the pretty version of the object being parsed through and showing data coming out of that object, or multiple objects. So what we have over here is we have this OMDB submit.click, and all my functionality is within this click event listener. So if you look at OMDB submit, that is nothing but the button. So if I go back here, this is this button over here. Questions so far? We good? All right. So what I want to do now is I want to get the value that someone put into the title and the year. I'm going to leave title as title and year as year right now because I don't want to change too many things up. But when someone puts in something for the title now, instead of using this part with a T, I'm going to change that to an S. So what that's supposed to do, according to what we just read up on, it's supposed to allow us to search for different things based on the title that we're given. So this is according to documentation, and we're hoping that it works. From there, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff and going through it and being able to get stuff out. So first, what I want to do is check to see if this works. So if I type in matrix, hit submit, and everything goes to hell. So let's see what's going on. Maybe S doesn't work. Yeah. Kivanch, I'll explain what Stringify is in a bit. First, I want to focus on getting this working. So apparently their S parameter doesn't seem to work the way we want it to. So let's see why. Search multiple movies. Blah, 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 OMDB API. And this is another issue with APIs, is they'll tell you something that might not work. S equals Batman, page equals 2. Yeah, it seems about right. This is the IMDB API or the OMDB API? Oh, this is IMDB. But they're based on the same thing. Let's see. Yeah, it sounds about right. I'm not sure why it's not working. This is what we had before, which is a title. Let's remove the year. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put that in here. Equals title. I'll get rid of year. And I'll get rid of all the other stuff too. So let's see if that works. Matrix. Let's see. Else. It should just stringify the response, but it's not doing anything. Let's try another movie. Sharknado. Sharknado. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's not working. Let me try it raw. So this equals, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Sharknado. Yeah, that works. I don't know why it's not working on our end. That's weird. Let me take all this out. S equals Sharknado. Yeah, that should work. Plus the title. Title is getting the value from that and just appending it. So let me see, console.log, query string. Wait a minute. Copy it. Let's see. Sharknado. There we go. Got it. I need to add the protocol. Okay, so that works. Cool. So what we have so far is the ability to get multiple objects out and get the pure JSON response back. Now, Kivanch was asking about Stringify. So why don't we take a look at what Stringify does. JSON Stringify. So the reason that you want to convert it to a string is because you don't really have the ability to display an object into HTML without first converting it into a different data type. So if you want to display an object on the output, you use this JSON.stringify, and what it does is it goes through the entire object and essentially just turns everything into a string. So that's pretty much the gist of it. However, on the back end, or not on the back end, but on the JavaScript aspect of it, if you want to go through it programmatically, then you don't use JSON.stringify because you want to extract the data from the response. So it's kind of weird because you really don't use Stringify in times when you're like, okay, I want to go through the data. So most of the time, you're not going to be stringifying the response. But if you want to just display all the data to the screen, then you just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do a raw output, which is what we're doing over here when we do the output, is we just dump all of that information at once. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, anyone confused about what I just did? Or have questions about it? All good? All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on our query. So in the output, if the output is an XML format, so we're not going to work with XML. We're only going to be working with JSON. But if it wasn't a different format like XML, then I'm sure there's like an XML.stringify. I haven't worked with XML in a really long time, and it's kind of like outdated. But if you are working with XML, then yeah, you would have to output it in its own form. However, I think XML is actually, it's very similar to how HTML looks. So you might not need to actually stringify it. You might be able to output it directly. So XML is like extensible markup language. It's very similar to how HTML looks. And so because it's a markup language, you might not even have to stringify the information. So what we have so far is this AJAX call, right? We got the information out from the title. We don't need the year anymore, so we're just going to leave that. And what we're doing is we just do a search based on a title. And we're going to find everything with that title. And we want to display, let's say, only the name of a movie. So to make an AJAX call, the first thing you do is use this bling operator and use the dot method, the dot operator with the AJAX method, and you pass the AJAX method in object. And that object has two properties and values. So the URL, and the URL is going to contain the query string. So the query string is going to be this over here. And the method that we're using so far is get. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to use a promise. So a promise is basically just a callback that waits for the AJAX request to be finished. Once the AJAX request is finished, then you pass the object that gets returned to you. So when we're using a JSON response, the response returned to you is going to be a JSON object. And that inherently and implicitly gets passed to you, and you can name it whatever you want. So when you pass in this anonymous function to this promise, it comes with this response. So you just type this in, and you have access to the object from here on out. Does that make sense, or does anyone want me to review that again? Is an anonymous function something without, hold on, oh, this piece of shit. An anonymous function is not something without a var, it's just something that is not named. So an anonymous function is, in this case, an anonymous function is here. This is actually still technically an anonymous function if you have this is an anonymous function because it's not named. If you have this, now it's a named function inside of a function expression. But we normally use something like this. And this is a named function. Anonymous functions are good when you're using them one time and you don't need to use it over and over. In the case of, for instance, a promise. All right, so what I did here is I said if the response.length, so the length of the object is less than 1, that means if nothing was returned, then I have something that says, okay, sorry, no movies were found, and then I have a sad face. Otherwise, if something does get returned, I say, okay, give me the raw data. So from here, we actually want to do something probably a bit better. I can't even make this bigger or smaller. Hold on. There we go. It doesn't have a little cursor. Let's see, what do I want to use? So when we have our data back, we got something like this, right? We got back Sharknado, we got Sharknado 2, Sharknado 3. We got back Riff Tracks Live, Sharknado, Sharknado Heart of Sharkness, Superman versus Sharknado, Sharknado Feeding Frenzy. So we got back a bunch of different stupid movies. And we know what the properties are going to be. So what we want to do is, since they're going to be in the same format each time, OMDB makes a good example of being able to use the for loop. So in our case, we're getting back a object. That object has an array of other objects inside of it. So why don't we console.log this object? So I think it's going to be easier to look at. Okay, console.log, and we say response. And let's see what it looks like when we put Sharknado. This object. And this object has a search object within it. A search array, and within that array, it has a bunch of different objects. So this is actually using the almost exact same, functionality as what we just went over with the customers object, where we have an array of objects. So what we could do is we can copy and paste some code. So why don't I copy and paste this, or just cut it? Actually, let me just leave that there in case someone wants to use it later. And let me put it here. So let's see. So now it's starting to get a little bit complicated. And this is why code can look really confusing at times, because you're looking at a finished product. But really, if you look at how it's created, it actually becomes a lot more simple. So we have this for var I equals and blah, 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 customers.length. Well, right now what we're trying to go over is the search array. So to do that, what we want to do is first go into the response object. So we just say response dot search dot length. Now, why am I doing response dot search dot length? What does that mean? So start typing in your answers. Right, so you're going to the length of the search array, which is inside of the search property, which is inside of the object, right? Exactly, excellent work. So we're looping through, we're gonna loop through each element inside of the search array. So to do that, we're going to use a simple for loop, right? So that's what we did before as well, and we're doing it again. Now what I want to do is, instead of doing this, New York City or New York, I'm going to get rid of that and make sure you get the closing bracket as well. So what we have here is another for in loop that we can use. So let's see what data that we want to get out of here. We want, let's say, the title And let's just do title. So we'll keep it simple. So for each property inside of each object in the search array, so what we have to do is we have to do response.search so from here, we're able to go through and say, okay, for each property inside of the search array, for each property inside of an object inside of the search array, what I want to do is something here. So why don't we, again, look at the most basic example. So we get rid of a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm just going to do console.log. And I do prop. So let's do Sharknado again. And this gives me all the properties inside of each object. So I get title, year, IMDB ID, type, and poster. So pretty much what I was looking for. So now I want to narrow it down. Sorry, so far, does anyone have any questions? And does everyone see that we're doing the exact same thing again, except with OMDB instead of our custom customer object? You have about 10 seconds to respond. Okay. The properties and objects aren't ordered like, let's see, in arrays, right? So the properties in an object, so the object and the array is a type of object, but the elements in an array are correct. Yeah, they don't have a set index. But the properties do have an order. Like they do have, like this one first, this one second, this one third. So the object does keep track of where the elements, the object's properties are, though. But it doesn't use the same format of indexing. However, because the properties in an object are kept in a certain order, you can actually go to the previous property or the next property. And that's how you actually access the object from the key. So let's say that you had a value of New York City, and you wanted to only access objects that have that specific key, then that's one way of doing it. Cool, or yay, nay? Cool, okay. So we have this console.log prop, but instead, again, we don't want just like the property, we want the value of the properties. So what we're gonna do is, again, we take it one step at a time. And what I'm gonna do is the same thing I did before. And now I should get back the values for each one. So now you get back Sharknado 2013, the IMDB ID, what type it is, and an image. So now I want to narrow that down. So I say if, let's see, prop is equal to, let's see, title, we just want title. So now that's really clean, right? So you can actually make buttons that would filter things out for the individuals going to it. So let's say that someone says, okay, I want Sharknado and I want just the title. So you can do, okay, Sharknado, and you can have another button that says title, and it would organize the data for them. So it would only show the titles like we have here. So now let's go a step further and display this to our HTML. So I want it to be prettified. So what I want to do is let's see, I think I have predefined CSS classes. So I'm just going to use those. Movie container. Let's use movie container. And .html. It's going to have this inside, and then it's going to have prop. And then what I'm going to do is the same thing that I did before with the customer object. And I'm going to do, let's see, what do I want to append to? Pretty movie output? Let's do that. Sharknado. There we go. So if I want to get rid of my crappy Stringify one, just uncomment that. And let's do that again. Sharknado. And how cool is that? Now we have an application that shows the information about Sharknado in a decent format. So I'm able to get back information about all Sharknadoes. So every loop movie container is reset with new movie title, yes. Movie title, movie container wouldn't be doing this if I set it outside, but because I'm declaring it in here, well, actually, it still would be replaced each time because I'm assigning it again over and over, but I want to assign it in here. This is a very temporary variable and takes up very little memory. So it's good to do it this way. And this should actually help you guys out with the homework as well. I think the homework has you guys doing things in loops as well. So this could be useful for that. Questions so far? Make sure you guys ask because we're building one thing on top of another. So we start off with looping, then we went to looping over objects, then we went to console.logging the information from the objects, then we went into displaying that in the HTML, then we went to using the AJAX call alongside of this looping, and then we combine it together. So if you guys have questions, make sure you guys ask it now. The for and loop, yeah, you only loop over properties of an object or the values of the properties. That's why it's called a for in loop as opposed to a for loop. So for in, it's like the property in an object. All right, let's move on. So we also have, let's see, connecting, calling, accessing objects. I think we did that. A for loop within a for loop. So let's do a for loop within a for loop. So a for loop within a for loop is good for accessing multi-dimensional arrays. Multi-dimensional arrays, they're a computer science concept, but it's actually pretty simple. And they're also for getting things in multiple layers. So let's see, what's a good example of a for loop within a for loop? I mean, we actually did use a for loop within a for loop, but we used, instead of a regular for loop, we used a for in loop. So essentially we did go over the concept, but let's say that you wanted to go over something, I don't know, like 1,500 times or something, right? Or some crazy amount of times. For instance, that you had, let's see, can we generate an array online? Let me see, generate multi-dimensional. That's stupid. How do you spell dimensional? Dimensional array. Here we go. Online, is there a way? There's no way to just do it really quick. Online, come on, just give me a multi-dimensional array. Ah, here we go. It says click here. What? Where do I click? I don't want to have to do this by hand. All right, I'll just have to create this by hand. So let's say that we have, I don't know, let's create 0 I less than, I don't know, 50. And each one this is not going to be simple. Let's just do this for now. Okay, so I'm just going to generate an array with random numbers. So I just do first r push, and if I do I, what this does is console.log this. It gives me an array with 50 numbers, starting at 0, ending at 49. Yes, thank you. You made one for me. That's pretty small, but okay. I was hoping to use it for a bigger one, but that's a good idea. Let's start off small. Thank you, Mario. Thank you for helping me stay focused and not overcomplicating things. Let's see. Okay. Let's just do this as R, or multi-dimensional R. So this array is a multi-dimensional array, meaning that it's an array filled with arrays. So if you wanted to loop through this, it might be a little bit difficult. Or sorry, if you wanted to access things in here, it might be a little bit difficult. But with a for loop that's nested, it's actually pretty easy. So I do var I equals 0, I less than, let's see, multi array dot length, I plus plus. Then what I can do is just say, okay, if I did this, this would, if I just did it here, it would give me, let's see, well, at this point, it really wouldn't give me much. It would just tell me like what elements I have, and it would just be like each array, right? So if I just console.log I, it would just give me array, array, array. And this is actually the 4th element in here. So this would just be the 4th array. So if I want to loop through this, then what I do is for j equals 0, less than, let's see, multi-dim r I dot length, and I do j plus plus. So now I have the ability to console.log every element in every array within this multi-dimensional array. So if I do something like this, it should work. 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. Nope, that's not right. Let's see. What did I do wrong? Okay. So it's going through each one of these. J equals 0. Oh, duh. Yeah, I need to, let's see. Yeah, that's just going to print out J. So I need to do multi-dim R I think J. No, multi-dim. Did I spell it wrong? Multi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Yeah, that works. So what I did here was, again, a little complicated, but this works when you have arrays within arrays and you're trying to loop through them. And this is just one example of using a nested loop. So the first thing I did was, let me comment this out. I said, I need to go over this entire array. So I go over this entire array once, and I get all the elements out of it. I say, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I have 4 elements in here. Cool. Let's go through each one. Then I want to say, okay, I want to go inside each one of these elements. Excuse me. So to go through each one of these elements, what I do is I make another loop. And of course, I have to start off with a different variable. Now, the convention for that is you're supposed to use the following letters. So if I say J for the next part, so J will then be my iterator. Right now, J is just a number, right? But I want this to run for each element that's inside of here, right? I want it to run this many number of times. How many number of elements there are in each one of these that I'm going through, that's how many times I want to run this inner loop. So when this runs, it's actually going to run, this outer loop only runs 4 times. But because this is going to run the length of each of these arrays, I get to use this J to then console.log or output whatever's inside of these arrays. So for example, if I have console.log and I have multi-dimensional array, then I say, okay, so whatever element I'm on, and then further index into this and use J. So each time this is going to loop through, this is going to be 1, that's going to be 2, then it's going to hit 3. And it ends with the length of that specific array. So it's going to end here. And so I have 1, 2, 3, then this will end, move on to the next element. Then this will show 4, 5, 6, right over here, 4, 5, 6, then this will end. Now this goes on to the next one. This does 7, 8, 9. Again, this will end. Then I'll go to the next one. Now this is one of them, right? So it's looking at this as one element. All right, so it's just printing out an array, and then it's saying 13, 14. That's what we saw over here. So this is just one element that's printing out. But it prints out the array with all the information in the console.log. But if you wanted to print that information out even more, you'd have to use another for loop within this for loop. So I would say, like, if there's, you know, another array inside of it, then use another for loop and go through it. Confusing, or did you guys get that? Cool. All right, so let me send you guys the latest iteration of the file, because I keep messing around with it. Again, call me out if I make any mistakes. I'm just kind of doing this on the fly, so I'm bound to make a mistake at some point. All right, so let's move on to the next part. For that example, would you say if element is an array, you could use type of is equal to array. And that could be one good way of going into it. So if you do like, you know, multi-dimen ij equals, or sorry, yeah, type of, you know, multi-dimen ij is equal to array, then you could do like, okay, now do like another for loop. So, all right. And that would take care of any any arrays within that. But a better way to actually go through an entire array is actually recursion. But because recursion is really slow, I actually don't recommend it. Well, I recommend it in certain circumstances. Maybe that one's like a good way of going about it, like a good use case. Where are the questions? Oh, here they are. Okay. Looping through objects, APIs. Okay, we did that. Any specific questions about APIs so far, though? I mean, APIs are a giant concept, and each API is different. So we just went through like OMDB as an example, but that's just one API. There's so many, and they essentially work all the same way, though. No? All right. So let's move on to, let's see, jQuery. All right, thank you. So jQuery, help to see examples where some of these functions are used in everyday applications. So the functions we actually went over are used in everyday applications a lot, like these HTML methods. But essentially jQuery, when you're using it, you want to make sure that you're including the script first, this code.jQuery, either using a CDN or locally. From there, the way jQuery works is you have to use the Bling operator to either query something that already exists or create something. From there, you either add an event listener like .click, .on, or you can use something like a method to directly access something, or to get or to set something in. So in this case, when we use .val, what this did was retrieve whatever's inside of title, and then we save that into title. So this is very commonly used. So if you want an example of like commonly used methods, value is used a lot. Append, HTML, these are very common. There's a lot of jQuery methods that are available, but the ones we go over are generally the more popular ones to be used. Ajax is a very common jQuery method to use. And Ajax is actually, you can make it as complicated as you want, but the way we've been using it is fairly simplistic. I don't know how much else you want me to go in there without going down a giant rabbit hole. So I'm looking at Ron's comment right now. So Ron, if you want me to go into like specific jQuery that is confusing, I don't know if you're online, or if I'm just talking to myself at this point. Let's see. So Ron, you're not even online. All right. So I'm just gonna skip that one because I'm not sure how much he wants me to go into it. Brandon Chang, are you here? So there's people who have asked for stuff without being in the session. Karunashi. Okay, so you're Brandon. You always have a different name than your real name. So over here you're Soshi, and now you're Karunashi. Okay, so could I go more in depth on Ajax? Sure. Let me close this up. So Ajax essentially are just asynchronous JavaScript calls. So what you're doing is you're saying, anytime I want information from an application or from an API from the front end, I use an Ajax call. And this, what it does is it makes a browser request call. So your browser actually makes this call to a server. And what it does is this method in jQuery. And again, this jQuery method is based on vanilla JavaScript. If you guys wanted to use this with vanilla JavaScript, you could do that too, but jQuery makes it a lot easier. It gets passed an object. This object contains generally two properties. There's other thing that you can do. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can add to it. But in the basic sense, you just pass it a URL. The URL is going to be a property of that object that you're passing. And the value of this property is going to be the string that comes from the API you're trying to hit. So remember, whenever you get confused about whether or not something is working using an API call, make sure that you test it in the browser first to see if it works. So what I did was I was wondering why something wasn't working. So I tested it on the browser and I realized I didn't add the protocol. And that's what's making it work. Notice that if you put www.omdbapi.com like this in the browser, it converts it automatically to HTTPS. So if I put Sharknado, this automatically gets converted into an HTTPS call because your browser is really intelligent. But what happens is if you try and do that from your application, it stays as www and doesn't add the protocol. So what I did was I just looked at the documentation. I said, what do I need to do? Oh, I need to give it this specific format, and that's the format I'm going to use to make this Ajax call. So again, Ajax call is nothing but an asynchronous call. So it works by itself and doesn't care about anything around it. It's going to make this call, and then the next thing is going to run, right? So it's going to make a call to this specific URL using your browser. And it's going to use the method get. Once you get the information back, we're looking at JSON objects as the response that gets returned. So then we use this done method to then take in that response object. This function is an anonymous function that gets passed in to this done method. This could be done or it could be then. Now what happens is from there, you're able to use this response object to do whatever you want with it. So you can console.log it, you can put stuff somewhere. We're also going to be going into how to add stuff to the database from here too. So let's say that we have a local database. So we have, sorry, not a local database, but let's say that we have Firebase or MySQL or Mongo. We can store the information that we got from an API into something that's persistent. So it becomes really powerful. Did you have any other questions about Ajax? So Catherine, anything else? Yes, no, maybe so. Who knows? All right, could you go? Okay, no, I just want to clarify what it does, and it makes more sense now. Excellent. Okay, cool. I keep seeing the word curl. Curl is a program that's built into your terminal. It's usually built in. I think it's built into every terminal. And curl allows you to make calls from your terminal. Now, I wouldn't worry about curl right now, though. Curl is if you're making like command line applications that make calls to something. So again, don't worry about that right now. What you should be interested in is NPM, Node, Ruby, other things that are web applications calling things from the backend. Now you could use an NPM package to put into a robot, and that robot makes a call, like maybe like, you know, like a smart mirror or like what you classically think of as a robot. But we're generally don't go into like embedded system stuff. But we do use like, you know, backend. We're gonna be using a lot of backend system stuff though. So objects in depth. So Brandon, how would you like me to go over this? We went through an object, and you say you wanted to utilize in details with arrays. So we did that. We didn't do it with methods. Did you want me to create a method within an object? Oh, okay, cool. All right, did anyone want me to go over any other concepts? And you guys can all unmute now, by the way. So now we can have like a discussion, whatnot, instead of me just going over stuff. Is it common to have JavaScript intermingled with jQuery? Yes. No, you don't just use one or the other. You definitely use them in combination. Because jQuery is dependent on a lot of native JavaScript, like for loops and everything like that. But jQuery is essentially just JavaScript. So don't think of them as independent things. Think of them as working together. Good questions. Do you guys feel a little bit better now, by the way, or a little bit worse? Let's see, how do I go back to the meeting? What's going on? Let's see. How do you randomly select a property from an object? Okay, that's interesting. First, here. How do you randomly select a property from an object? So if I use math.random in an object based on the object's length, I think I could just use, yeah. Yeah, so I could, what I could do is based on the object's length, I can do something like set the maximum parameter for the math.random to be the object.length, and then do a math.random on the within a for in loop, I believe. So, geez, thinking of how to use that index though. I'd have to think about that one. Yeah, give me a time to work on that, and I'll give you back a response. So Ben, if you could PM me, and I'll come up with something. I'll send you the algorithm. Let's see. Better we should do that every week. Better? Okay. Yeah, I wish I had time every week, but I just unfortunately don't. I'm working on a lot of projects on the side. And I wanted to give you guys some review though when I do have time. So this weekend, like today, I was free, but next weekend I'm definitely not. And most weekends I have projects that I have to work on. But I'm glad that you guys found it helpful. How to apply concepts. Get the concepts, but it's difficult to think of the best way to go about assignments. Okay, so that one, again, I would suggest that we go through the algorithms together during office hours and on your own. So when you're done with homework, just go back to practicing algorithms. There's two things you can go. Go back on concepts and on your exercises and your homework and see if you can refactor them. And another thing is to work on algorithms. And these are the two things that you should be working on. If you do your algorithms from Free Code Camp, they actually build on top of, kind of on top of each other, but essentially it just gets more and more difficult. And it shows you like how to scale something. So how to solve more and more complex problems. So instead of just, starting off with something like, gigantic and something, it starts you off with, okay, how do I solve this small thing? Okay, now it's like, how do I solve this slightly bigger thing? How do I solve this slightly bigger thing? Okay, now how do I solve this giant thing, So it really does help. Okay. Yeah, so Ben, just PM me and I'll get back to you about that. Joanna, right now we're still using GitHub pages. It might be using, like the directions might say Heroku, but the instructions just haven't been updated from the curriculum side. So yeah, it's just gonna be, I think we're using GitHub pages until week 10 when we start using, I think that's when we start using Node. And yeah, you guys can talk now, by the way. Cool. That's it? Very good. All right. So if that's it, then I'm going to get back to one of my said projects. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you guys post to general. No worries, guys. So I will try and open up some time for you guys, but I try not to make promises that I can't keep. But I will, again, try my best to have some additional review sessions throughout the next 6 months, or I guess 4.5 months now. Make sure that you guys continue networking. There's still some people that I've missed that I haven't gotten to talk to yet. But essentially, what really gets you the job is networking. From my experience with development and teaching development, really the students who get the jobs are not necessarily the best at programming. It's the ones who network the best and show some competency in programming. So it's a combination of both. So make sure, like, even if you're introverted, I know it's really hard, but you're in a world full of you're now in a world full of nerds. I mean, you don't really have to be nervous. It's like, they're into some really weird shit. We're into some really weird shit. So really don't worry about looking embarrassing or feeling weird in any way about networking. A lot of them are willing to help out. A lot of them are really genuinely interested in the field and like helping others. So make sure that you guys do reach out to the people that you know, people that you don't know. First, it's going to be people that you know, then it's going to be people you don't know. But make sure you guys keep track of that. I'm also going to be hounding you on doing that during office hours. Make sure you guys go to the Interview Weekly on Sundays, and make sure you guys go to the hackathons. The hackathons are going to get better and better for you guys as the course goes on, because there's going to be more and more topics that are really interesting that you guys are going to start getting into, and it'll get you out of your comfort zone. This whole program is to get you out of your comfort zone, but that takes you a step further, and you get to build stuff along with students from across the country in different universities doing the same coding bootcamp. So it's really a great opportunity. Make sure that you guys take advantage of it. It's one of the best parts of the program, in my opinion. Anything else before I go? During job projects, or sorry, during jobs, do projects that you create on the side, whether those jobs belong to you or the company? Depends. If you've seen Silicon Valley, it actually is true that if you work on the project on company time, like on the campus, I think it is their property. But if you work on it on your own time outside of work, I'm like, don't quote me on this, but I think it's your property. Almost every programmer I know is working on some side project for fun or for passion or for money or something. So it really is a fun field because like it becomes your hobby and your job, and it's just like you become grateful that you get paid to do something fun. Cool. All right. Well, I'll catch you guys later. I'll see some of you tomorrow. The other ones I'll see on Tuesday. No problem. Take care, everyone. Now, how do I quit this? Let's see. There we go.